Is your portfolio standing on a trapdoor? Right now, AI valuations are skyrocketing, and new unicorns are popping up everywhere, making the ghost of 2000 feel very real again. Back then, investors didn't face a one-day collapse. They lived through a slow-motion train wreck that took over 2 years to finally hit the floor. We are here to show you the facts. This is the anatomy of the 2000 dot-com crash and the lessons it holds for the AI era.
We aren't here to give you financial advice or tell you to dump your tech stocks. We are here to look at the cold, hard facts of the dot-com bubble. This is part 2 of our 4-part series on the biggest market crashes of the last 40 years. We're going to dissect the lead-up, the timeline of the fall, and the agonizingly slow recovery that followed.
To understand the crash, you have to understand the staggering height from which we fell. If you had invested in the NASDAQ in early 1990, you had a normal 5-year run. You were seeing maybe 10% growth a year since around 1990, which felt safe and predictable. And then the world went mad. Between 1995 and March 2000, the S&P 500 tripled. But the NASDAQ, it quintupled, peaking at 532 on March 10, 2000. That massive spike in 1999 wasn't just a gain, it was a textbook bubble. While previous returns of 25% were excellent, 1999 was different. It was demand pull at its most extreme. Capital rushed into anything ending in .com, regardless of whether the company had a profit or even a business plan. By comparison, the NASDAQ is now around 22,000. 5 years ago, it was 14,000, a 60% rise. 10 years ago, it was 5,000. So, while growth over this decade has been strong, the last few years haven't been anything special compared to what happened just before the dot-com crash. Maybe this is a good time to say that this video is for educational purposes only and is not financial advice. All investing involves risk, so always consult a professional before making investment decisions, as we cannot take liability for any financial losses.
I like to look at the crash itself as a drama in 3 acts. Act 1, the Wobble, March-May 2000. In March 2000, the NASDAQ hit its peak and then lost 10% in just 3 weeks. But here's the kicker. The S&P 500 didn't follow. It actually gained 7%. This confused everyone. People thought it was just a tech correction and that the rest of the economy was fine. But by May, the NASDAQ was down to 3,200 and the S&P 500 finally realized the party was over and joined the slide. Act 2, the Deceptive Summer. The summer of 2000 was deceptively peaceful. Markets even recovered a bit, with the NASDAQ climbing back to 4,100 by July. This is the most dangerous time for any investor, the false rally. People started shouting that the bottom was in. They were wrong. Act 3, the Relentless Slide. In September 2000, the real slide began. It wasn't one spectacular 20% drop, it was worse. It was relentless. 1% today, 2% tomorrow. You'd get a small jump on Wednesday to give you hope, then a 3% drop on Friday to take it away. The absolute bottom didn't arrive until October 3, 2002. It took over 2.5 years just to hit the floor.
When investors get scared and take $100 out of the market, where do they put it? In the long run, stocks are king. $100 in the S&P 500 in 1990 would be worth roughly $4,500 today. U.S. real estate wouldn't have even made a tenth of that in the same time frame. However, in the 5 years following the dot-com crash, we saw a reverse correlation. As stocks stayed low, real estate prices soared. Between 2002 and 2006, property actually outperformed the NASDAQ. Investors were disgusted with shares and wanted something they could touch, something safe. This massive demand pull toward property is exactly what led to our next crash in 2008.
You might wonder, if the experts saw the bubble, why didn't they sell? The answer is career risk. If a fund manager sells early and the market keeps rising, they look incompetent and lose their job. But if the market crashes and they lose money like everyone else, they have an excuse. The whole market fell. Professionals are more afraid of missing a rising market than they are of the crash itself. As an individual investor, you have a superpower. You don't have to answer to a board of directors every 3 months. You can afford to be rational.
What can we learn from this? Crashes aren't instant. They are a series of slides. 2. The hardest part isn't spotting the crash, it's spotting the false recovery. Today's environment is unique. Real estate is stagnant, interest rates are high, and gold is at record levels. If people decide to dump AI stocks tomorrow, where will the money go? Unlike in 2000, there isn't an obvious safe haven like cheap real estate or high-yield bonds waiting to catch the fall. This makes today potentially much more volatile.
We've looked at the relentless slide of 2000 and the lost decade that followed, but the story doesn't end there. The 2008 crash and the COVID-19 flash crash followed similar patterns, but were triggered by very different factors.
In our next video, we'll compare the dot-com crash to the 2008 subprime crisis to see why one recovered in 5 years while the other took nearly 13. To get the full story and dive deeper into the data, you can find our complete series and the accompanying book in the description below. Stay curious. Don't just look at what a stock is worth. Look at where the rest of the world is putting its money. Join us for Part 3, the subprime shadow. Remember, in investing, ignorance can be comforting, but it is an expensive luxury.